Hello everyone and welcome to another Bible study and episode review in Shady Oak Ministries. I'm of course Shady Oak and today we'll be going over episode 16 of season 2 of the TV show My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. The episode Read It and Weep. Definitely a more influential episode as far as character development on Rainbow Dash's part, but to start this off I want to just get right into scripture. We'll be reading out of 2 verses, definitely small as far as quantity, but high in quality as far as personal application goes into our lives and what we can take away from as far as positive influences go is from this TV show and its comparison and inspiration from Scripture. Can you turn to the book of Philippians chapter 4 and verses 8 through 9? Paul the Apostle addressing one of the more mature churches in as far as where they were in their walk with God goes, in not just approving the things that were good from bad, but great from good, and recognizing the best possible thing in helping you grow in your walk with God often comes from the smallest and most overlooked sources, this channel being living proof of that. In Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 through 9, Paul says this, "Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue, and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you." Paul is just basically saying, by example, we tend to learn things in a more concrete manner than just by telling people that. You tell someone that you care about them, that you love them, and that you want the best for them, but just like James said, if you walk up to someone and says, be warm, be fed, be clothed, but you don't give him anything to meet those needs, you haven't done him any good. It's much better to live out the things by example rather than just claim these truths. It's better to show someone who Christ was like than tell them the Bible said this about Jesus, you should follow him, because they can't see Jesus, but they are looking at you. And likewise, as far as personal application goes, we remember in 1 John, in previous studies, that said if we ourselves are going to say we love God, who we can't see, but hate our brothers who we do see, we're lying, because God said, love others as you love me, and you'll be loving me through others. So, noting this as far as the example that we set makes a greater impact, but we also need to realize the point of this episode was the examples we see in others and what we take interest in often influence us more than we give them credit for. And of course, this is what I'm speaking about as far as our interests, our hobbies. And in Rainbow Dash in this episode, she got exposed to her new hobby, which was reading. Never something she had definitely taken to heart as far as something she'd be interested in, and granted, a lot of us can agree when we were told to read books in school or were given opportunities to hear stories, but they didn't really meet us at that personal level that we always thought or considered they would. Once we find that book or story or character that we do like, we do relate to, especially considering Daring doing the Sapphire Stone, she was in the same situation Rainbow Dash was. There was relation, there was similar ideals, similar personality, and something that she would aspire to. You went on the adventure with them almost as if you were one of them. And with this as our interest, we think about these things. We spend our time on them. And that is where the word meditation comes in, because it's literally our interests but internalized and verbalized. Meditation isn't repeating the same thing over and over, floating 4 feet off the ground and that kind of thing. It's thinking about and spending time on something. Literally, what you're interested in, that's what you're meditating on if you act on those interests. And what we let into our heads literally sets the direction of who we are and who we're becoming, because it's like setting the atmosphere of your soul. If I'm into more darker things, if I enjoy scary stories, I set for myself a situation, a surrounding, and a perspective on life that centers itself around fear, around depressing things, and I take these things to heart because my interests center themselves around it, and thus I'm literally setting my eyes to this perspective and looking for these things. And likewise, what you see in this channel is what I've tried to do, by example, is to enjoy things like My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, my interest, and use them for my love for God. I want to improve my relationship with Him, and because I love Him so much, I want to see Him in all the ways and the things that I do and enjoy in life, and instead of meditating on the show, I meditate on Him through it. And it's the smallest things that can often set the objectives and goals and purposes for our lives as far as where we want to head. And this is a useful tool. But note, like any tool, it can be used for positive or negative means. We saw positive examples when Daring Do influenced Rainbow Dash, being a quote-unquote fictional character. I won't spoil anything from Season 4. But she set an example of someone not overcome by obstacles, and in relatable ways to Rainbow Dash, continuing to follow her goals. And as a result, Rainbow Dash was influenced by this. She related to a character in a book and gained a desire and affinity for reading. And something that she never had before, but because she was influenced by Daring Do's personality of regardless of the obstacles, whether it was her interests or her broken wing and the fact she had been in the forest for 60 days and nights, it was that perspective of her heart that was changed. Positive or negative, it was a good thing in this case. She admired her character and based and reflected herself on it. But it's not always positive, because we saw when Rainbow Dash kept reading upon those interruptions, they were almost kind of key as far as where they were in the story. We saw a negative example in that Daring Do's goal was to quote-unquote steal an artifact. Now note, this goal and objective was interrupted, so she didn't get the whole story. She didn't receive input about her motives or who she was trying to keep the idol out of the hands of or who it belonged to. But you saw when Rainbow Dash was then separated from the book, she took what she learned from that book and saying, well, just like overcoming obstacles, since Daring Do saw something that she needed, that she wanted, that she had the desire for. Note, Twilight didn't cast the spell. She did that all on her own. Daring Do and Rainbow Dash both went on the adventure to steal an artifact, whether it was the Sapphire Stone or the book. Rainbow Dash took up stealing. And note, this influence was a negative one, and it's not to say like, oh, we watch movies about, gun violence and gangs and stuff, and we're going to go around killing people. No, that's not what I'm saying, but we do need to realize that in the way that we are letting these things into our minds, we're looking at life through these perspectives, because the things that we enjoy, the things we let into our heart, they change us. And keeping this in mind, also recognize that as you change, as you move and shift your mind towards these goals and perspectives and views, what news and political insights you guys let into your minds, what opinions you formulate, it all comes from sometimes the smallest of things. And note, not to say that one is held above the other. I would hold God's perspective as higher above any, but in recognizing this, when you make poor decisions, recognize it often starts earlier than you would give it credit for. Because in the influence that Rainbow Dash had in saying, this is how I should approach the problem, it wasn't that the book told her to do it, but she saw things from the perspective the book gave her, and note, she didn't read the whole story. She didn't know why or who Alizota was. She didn't know why it would be important to get that stone out of Alizota's hands, because she was pursuing the preservation and peace of the country as far as what power that artifact would give Alizota. She didn't receive the whole story, and she needed to know it's much more important to read the entire article rather than just the title or the opinions of the author. We need to know what is happening before we allow ourselves to make opinions on them. We need to know who a person was rather than picking and choosing certain aspects of them before we just choose to admire only this aspect of their life. And note, we get the same example from Scripture. If you only read certain aspects of the Old Testament and you say, okay, God requires blood sacrifice, that sounds like just any other pagan idol. He sounds bloodthirsty. He has poor character. Oh wait, but then you go to the future and say, the only reason I set these things in place was to point you towards a future sacrifice and saying, understand, I am life. And you separate yourself from me, you leave me, you're going from light into darkness. You're going from life into death. Thus, if by separating yourself from me, you're choosing to die. So, because, in practical wisdom, a friend seeks love if he covers a matter, God sought a method of pointing us to the way where he would cover sins forever by providing temporary sacrifices through animals, not human sacrifice, note you, but through these creatures, and saying this would one day point towards the Passover lamb that would die for the sins of the world. I'm pointing you towards me. Oh, well, what about all these things of genocide and God ordering a people group to be wiped out down to the last woman and child? How could God be so cruel? Oh, wait, but then you look into the future and realize, well, how does this apply personally to my life? If I am to compromise in even the smallest of regards, an enemy or an obstacle or an addiction, and leave even the smallest of means for me to go back into those, I'm going to jump right on it. And then you also realize, wait, what was the character of this people group and nation towards the people of Israel? Well, we remember when Saul had spared one of the kings of the Amalekites, that because one of them had survived, this compromise was to be taken so seriously by God. We saw another scenario where because one woman escaped from God's order to wipe out everyone, that woman had a child, and their children eventually grew back into a people group who had nothing but outright hatred for God's people, and was only stopped because God rose up Esther to stop one of these children, Haman, from wiping out the Jewish people. Why did God put such priority in preserving the Jewish people? Because if the Jewish people were wiped out before Jesus came, salvation would not have come to the whole world. There was priority. You understand the whole story, you understand the whole message. So in understanding this whole study and this whole message as something we can take away from this, note that if you're going to understand the character of anybody, get the whole story. If you're going to understand the entire message of Scripture, you're going to understand the entire character of someone you want to become friends with. Get the whole story. And note also that it's the little things that make us who we are. And in taking these things away, what more influence, what better influence could there be than a book that we're given not about daring do, but in the person of Jesus Christ, literally our servant who was a king, the man who lived the perfect life we get to read about, and in all aspects of life know that he was tempted in every way we are, yet without sin. And by following his example, we can start to live lives like him. That's the purpose of Scripture. It's not man's story, it's not Israel's story, it's his story. It's the story of Jesus Christ, and the person that I greatly encourage all of you much more to follow than daring do. Because you follow a life like his, you'll be getting a lot more treasure than just the book series that AK Yearling can put out on a bi-yearly basis. Thank you for your time and listening to this study, and I hope it's been an encouragement to you as much as it has to me. If you have any questions or would like to know more, leave them in the comments below. But even more beyond anything, if you would like to see the gospel and these messages go out to the Brony community, please share this video with anyone you feel would be blessed by it. Thank you for your time, and God bless you.